Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to the course Principle in Animal Life 1. This is lecture number 38. The topic is Introduction to Metabolism. This is the first topic of the penultimate chapter of this course. Discussing agenda for the topic will be an introduction to metabolism, catabolism, anabolism, bioenergetics, and then we will study different forms of energy, that is potential energy, kinetic energy, thermal energy, and chemical energy. Lecture outcome. After watching and listening this lecture, students will know about metabolism and its significance and different forms of energy. Introduction. In organisms, metabolism transforms matter and energy. The totality of an organism's chemical reactions is called metabolism. From the Greek, metabol means change. So metabolism is the combination of all chemical reactions that occurs inside a living system. Metabolism is an emergent property of life that arises from orderly interaction between molecules. So it is one of the prime characteristics of life. Living organisms are involved in the breakdown of substances, in the formation of new substances. In our previous chapter, we studied the biological macromolecules, so the synthesis and degradation of these molecules are the two components of metabolism. Now, what is metabolic pathway? We can picture a cell's metabolism as an elaborate roadmap of many chemical reactions arranged as intersecting metabolic pathways. There are lots of chemical reactions going on inside the cell. In some areas of the cell, the process of degradation is going on. In other areas, the process of formation of new substances is going on. We have catabolic pathways and anabolic pathways. So the combination of all those reactions, they form the metabolic pathways. Now, in a metabolic pathway, a specific molecule is altered in a series of defined steps resulting in a certain product. For example, glycolysis starts with glucose. A glucose molecule is broken down into two molecules of pyruvic acid at the end of the glycolysis. Then the molecules of the pyruvic acid enters another pathway. Each step is catalyzed by a specific enzyme. Enzymes are biological catalysts, and they speed up the chemical reactions. Majority of the reactions in the living systems are multi-step, and all those reactions are catalyzed by substrate-specific or reaction-specific enzymes. The mechanism that regulate these enzymes balance metabolic supply and demand, just like traffic lights control the flow of traffic. Now, control and balance is very important inside a living system, because the living system has a limited supply of resources, and the order of the day is to utilize these resources wisely. So the regulation of these enzymes activities is important. For example, a substance which when required is synthesized, and when there is no requirement for that particular substance, then its synthesis is stopped. Similarly, if there is a need to degrade something, or for example a protein has performed its function, then there is a need to degrade that protein, so another set of enzymes are summoned. So the regulation of enzyme activity is important. Metabolism as a whole manages the material and energy resources of the cell. Some metabolic pathways release energy by breaking down complex molecules to simple molecules. These reactions are known as catabolic pathways. One major catabolic pathway is cellular respiration, which breaks down glucose and other organic fuels in the presence of oxygen to carbon dioxide and water. In aerobic cellular respiration, glucose enters into glycolysis. At the end of glycolysis, two molecules of pyruvic acid are produced, and then these two molecules of pyruvic acid enters into oxidative decarboxylation reaction, where acetyl coenzyme A is synthesized from them, which enters into Krebs cycle, and in this whole process NADH and FAD molecules are produced, which are the carriers of electrons, and thereby they start the process of electron transport chain. So all those reactions are catalyzed by enzymes, and at the end energy is produced in the form of ATP, and the end products are carbon dioxide and water. Pathway can have more than one starting molecule or product. Energy stored in the organic molecules becomes available to do cellular work, such as cell repeating or membrane transport. Recall from chapter 2 when we discussed the plasma membrane, where different proteins are incorporated in it, and these proteins are responsible for the movement of molecules across the plasma membrane, and the energy to those molecules, those proteins, is supplied by ATP. Similarly, ATP is responsible for the beating of cilia and flagella and for the intracellular transport. So this energy is produced, these ATPs are produced as a result of those catabolic pathways. Now, anabolic, in contrast, consume energy to build complicated molecules from simpler ones. They are sometimes called biosynthetic pathways. In those pathways, molecules are formed, new molecules. For example, the monomers combine and form the polymers. So a new molecule is being formed. So this is an anabolic pathway. And when the polymers break down and the monomers are released, then it becomes a degradation or catabolic pathway. Examples of anabolism are synthesis of an amino acid from simpler molecules and synthesis of proteins from amino acids. So these are the examples of the anabolic pathways where the synthesis of polymers takes place. Catabolic and anabolic pathways are the downhill and uphill avenues of the metabolic landscape. Downhill means where the degradation of substances takes place and energy is released, and uphill means where new substances are formed and energy is incorporated, energy is used. Energy released from downhill reactions of catabolic pathways can be stored and then used to drive uphill reactions of anabolic pathways. Now, inside the living organisms, the chemical reactions are usually coupled. The anabolic and the catabolic reactions are coupled. For example, anywhere an anabolic reaction is going on where ATP is used, so along with that anabolic reaction there will be a catabolic reaction going on where the ATPs will be released. So ATPs are being released from an catabolic reaction and incorporated into anabolic reactions. So those two types of pathways, they go hand in hand with each other, and these reactions are called coupled reactions. In this chapter we will focus on mechanisms common to metabolic pathways, because energy is fundamental to all metabolic processes. A basic knowledge of energy is necessary to understand how the living cell works. Although we will look at some non-living examples here to consider energetic principles. The concept demonstrated by these examples also apply to bioenergetics. Bioenergetics is the study of how energy flows through living organisms, how energy flows through living systems. Now here you see a metabolic pathway. It is a multi-step pathway, and you can see each step is catalyzed by a specific set of enzymes. The substrate is converted into the product, and the product becomes a substrate for another reaction, and the product of the second reaction becomes a substrate for yet another reaction. So these type of pathways are common in living systems. Now we will discuss different forms of energy that are of significance to the living systems. Energy is the capacity to cause change. In everyday life, energy is important because some forms of energy can be used to do work, that is, to move matter against opposing forces such as gravity and friction. So this is the everyday use of life. You are going somewhere and you are carrying luggage. Obviously the weight of the luggage will be felt to you, and you are using energy against the force of gravity. So this is one use of energy in the daily life. So similarly, inside the cell there is also a use of ATPs, where the transport occurs across plasma membrane, and if the transport is against concentration gradient, then ATPs are used in the intracellular transport, where the molecules move from one organelle to another organelle through the cytoskeletal routes. So this transport also requires ATPs. Put another way, energy is the ability to rearrange a collection of matter. For example, you expend energy to turn the pages of your book, and your cells expend energy in transporting certain substances across membrane. Obviously, the movement of muscles is because of the sodium and potassium pump, and that pump is an active transport where ATP is used, and when your muscles contract and relax, you can move your body. Energy exists in various forms, and the work of life depends on the ability of cells to transform energy from one form to another form. Now, this transformation of energy is of vital importance to life. The organisms feed upon substances and they derive energy from those food substances, which is a potential energy, and this potential energy is then utilized by them for movement. So the potential energy stored in food molecules is being utilized for movement. That is, energy is converting from potential to kinetic form. So this transformation of energy is vital for living systems. Energy can be associated with the relative motion of objects. This energy is called kinetic energy. The energy possessed by a body by virtue of its motion is called kinetic energy. Moving objects can perform work by imparting motion to other matter. A pool player uses the motion of the cue stick to push the cue ball, which in turn moves other balls. Water gushing through a dam turns turbines, and the contraction of leg muscles pushes bicycle pedals. So these are examples of energy being utilized and the process of change being occurred. Thermal energy is also kinetic energy because it is the energy because of the random movement of atoms or molecules. When you turn off a heater and you are sitting at a distance, after a few minutes you feel the effect of the heater because the molecules and atoms, they move and they reach your body, and thus they carry this thermal energy. Light is also a type of energy that can be harnessed to perform work such as powering photosynthesis in green plants. Of course, sun is a renewable source of energy, and it is responsible for the process of photosynthesis, and the plants are the primary producers. An object not presently moving may still possess energy. That energy is obviously a potential energy. So we studied about kinetic energy, which is the energy possessed by a body by virtue of its motion, and then we are now studying potential energy, which is the energy possessed by a body by virtue of its position. And because we are relating the living systems to these two forms of energy, so when the catabolic pathway occurs, the energy present in the bonds is broken down. For example, the breaking down of ATP molecule into ADP releases energy. So we can say that the energy was incorporated there in that third bond, and when this bond broke down, energy was released. So this is also a form of potential energy. Potential energy is because of location or structure. So this is the ATP molecule. When this ATP molecule is broken down and one of the phosphate is released as inorganic phosphate, so this is ATP, and one of the phosphate was released. The remaining molecule is ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and the energy which is released can be incorporated in anabolic processes. And here you can say that the potential energy was there in the structure of that molecule. So potential energy is not only because of location, it is also because of structure. Water behind a dam, for instance, possesses energy because of its altitude above sea level. In the dams where electricity is produced, the water is flowing from a high level down, and then their turbines are installed, and these turbines, they turn. The gushing water enables these turbines to rotate, and in turn they produces electricity. Molecules possess energy because of the arrangement of electrons in bonds between their atoms. The chemical energy is a term used by biologists to refer to the potential energy available for release in a chemical reaction. This is also a chemical reaction. Now potential energy is available in ATP, and once one of the phosphate is released, then in this process the energy will also be released, which can be incorporated elsewhere in an anabolic activity. Recall that catabolic pathways release energy by breakdown complex molecules. Biologists say that these complex molecules such as glucose are high in chemical energy. So the breakdown of glucose in glycolysis produces two molecules of ATP. During a catabolic reaction, some bonds are broken and others are formed, releasing energy and resulting in lower energy breakdown products. This transformation also occurs in the engine of a car when the hydrocarbon or gasoline react explosively with oxygen, releasing the energy that pushes the piston and producing exhaust. So whenever you find your car at a petrol pump, the hydrocarbon, which is a source of energy for your car, actually produces its energy when it reacts with oxygen. Although less explosive, a similar reaction of food molecules with oxygen provides chemical energy in biological systems, producing carbon dioxide and water as waste products. So a similar kind of reaction also occurs inside the living systems, where the fuel in the form of glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen and energy is released. They are referring to the aerobic cellular respiration. Biochemical pathways carried out in the context of cellular structures enable cells to release chemical energy from food molecules and use the energy to power its processes. So in the biochemical pathways, the food molecules are broken down and energy is released, and this energy can be incorporated in biosynthetic processes somewhere else. Now here is one of the examples of the transformation of energy, how energy is transferred from one form to another form. You can see a person in a swimming pool is climbing up, and the kinetic energy is being converted into potential energy because the position of the person is changing. Now the person is standing here, he is having no kinetic energy but potential energy because of his position. So when he jumps back into the water, the potential energy will be converted into kinetic energy, and this kinetic energy can perform work by displacing water. Now, if energy cannot be created or destroyed, and energy can convert from one form to another form, then why the living organisms are continuously in use of energy? For example, if we eat a food substance and we derive energy from it, now according to the first law of thermodynamics, this energy that cannot be destroyed. So why we cannot use that energy again and again? Why do we feel hungry? Why do we feel in need of energy every now and then? It is because during every energy transformation from one form to another form, some of the energy is wasted in the form of heat, and heat cannot perform work unless there is a temperature gradient. Heat can only perform work when there is a difference between temperature of two bodies and the heat flows from the hotter body towards the cooler body. Only in those circumstances the heat can perform work. So what we want to say here is that during every energy transformation, some form of the energy is wasted as heat. Means the transformation of energy is not 100% efficient. There is no ideal system in the world where the transformation of energy is 100% efficient. There must be some energy lost in the form of friction or heat. Now let's consider the original source of the organic food molecules that provided the specific chemical energy for these divers to climb the steps. So now the divers are climbing up, they are using energy, and this energy was initially derived from the food substance. This chemical energy was itself derived from light energy absorbed by plants. Suppose the person is feeding upon plants or it is feeding upon animals. The animals also feed upon plants. So ultimately the primary producer is plants, which uses sunlight and in the presence of carbon dioxide and chlorophyll, they produces glucose. Organisms are energy transformers. This was the end of the lecture. Thank you very much.